great one. If you're an organization that wants people to look up your zip code or look up their zip code and tell them what the closest stores are to them, what would you typically have to do? Well, you'd have to go buy a zip code database. You have to put it in SQL Server, or maybe you put it on a file system, right? And you get that in a subscription. You got to wait for it to come back, each time updating it, putting it out there. And then you got to write an application to go in and pull that data out of it. Well, somebody's already written that. You don't have to do that. They maintain the subscription. They put it out there as a service, and you basically rent or lease or usage-based that particular feature. Then over here, we have SQL Azure, which has our relational data, which is the same thing as SQL Server on-premise, but doesn't necessarily have all of the features. All right? So we can store our relational data, right? But we get an added bonus in Windows Azure Storage, because Windows Azure Storage is a step up from a regular file system storage. I can manage relational data in Windows Azure Storage. I can manage queues, and I can manage blob data. And maybe when I design my app, I don't have to use the more expensive SQL Azure. And then we have management. And that's another management console that's self-service for SQL Azure for you to be able to manage your SQL instance. The point I want to get at here is when you think about Windows Azure, it's an economic discussion and not a technical discussion. Why is it an economic discussion and not a technical discussion? Pat?
It's about, if you will, outsourcing some functionality in a more cost-effective manner.
Exactly. And because our computing resources, most of the time if we own them, sit there unused, right?
Right. Unutilized resources.
Unutilized resources. Chip, does it make you mad when you have unutilized resources that you're paying money for? Torques you off, doesn't it? Yeah. How about you, Ron?
What happens when you've already paid for it?
Well, in the Windows app,
you have to make a decision, right?
yeah, that is true. So when we talk about Windows Azure, everybody gets down in the technical, and that's the point I want to make. Going to Windows Azure and going to the cloud is a business discussion. It's not a technical one. Yes, there are technical details. There's guys like Jamie and Sean and Brian that will talk to you about all the acronyms and what's going on and what needs to be done, and they know how to implement this stuff. But in the reality is, you have to make a business choice about whether or not it makes sense for you to go to the cloud. I coined this phrase, and the beauty of it is it is actually the power of instant infrastructure. That's what I call Windows Azure. It is the power of having infrastructure at your disposal without having to own it. I'm going to skip over the common usage scenarios. I want to talk to you about the data centers and a little bit about the redundancy. You know, the IT guys say, well, I can build my own data center. Sure, yeah, you can. But at what cost? Can you build this kind of data center? Can you build redundant data centers in the North Central US, South Central? Can you put them in Europe, East Asia, Southeast Asia? Can you provide 365, 24/7 capability? Well, according to the SLA. I know we've had some outages west. I'm getting an evil eye there. But it's getting better, and it will be better. And they've corrected it. Human error, that's what happened there. Windows Azure Platform CDN, they replicate 2 terabytes per second of capacity across 22 global locations. So if you're pulling up your application that maybe resides in a data center in Europe, maybe you're a European country, and it's being pulled up in Asia, the blobs and the images and things like that, they're being pulled up from that location. Closer, better user experience. Let's talk about the data centers real quick. The commoditization of IT, when you look at these things, they are pods. They're like a train car. And they go in and they lower them in to a warehouse floor. Okay, now it's guarded with security and halon and all that kind of good stuff. What happens is the vendors come in and they go in and they connect up the electricity and they connect in the cooling and all those types of things, and they shut the door, and nobody ever goes inside of these pods ever again. Get that? In traditional IT, somebody be going in, running the key card code and walking in, but nobody goes in here and does it, because what's happening in here is we have all these blade servers sitting in here. And remember how I told you how Windows Azure goes in and it spins up and adds new compute cycles as you need them, these servers as they're needed? All right? Well, what they do is when these servers don't work anymore, they just take them offline. And when 60 to 70% of this pod doesn't work anymore and it's been transferred over to other pods and other places and replicated, they take the whole thing offline and refurbish it and redo it. Companies that used to build their own data centers, this technology that Microsoft has pioneered, all right, they're coming in and buying these pods. A company like Wes's that might have gone in and they talked about doing a data center refresh and rebuild it, are looking at this type of technology because they know every 5 years they're going to have to refresh. Maybe a little bit longer if you hold on to it. So this is what the containers look like on the inside. So I got one video and then a wrap up. Like most CEOs and most technical people, I've gone way over. We tend to be long-winded, a little bit of windbags. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Key points: business actualization and business realization. The cloud's not hype. It's changing how we think of computing resources, and we're transforming traditional IT. We're not necessarily pushing IT out the door, but we've got to consider how we're going to take advantage of the cloud and how we're going to change to this new business model. Windows Azure, platform as a service, existing on Microsoft data centers, and you have the power of instant infrastructure. Windows Azure is an economic discussion and not a technical discussion, and I would leave you with one thought. The guy that developed in, the horse and buggy, when the automobile came out, if you don't adapt, you're going to get left behind. That doesn't mean you have to do it today, but you need to be thinking about it and what your cloud strategy is going to be for the future. And if you've got any questions, this is my favorite Dilbert cartoon. It's a technology demo. The software isn't 100% complete. If it had a user interface, you'd see something here and something there and something there, and then you'd be saying, I got to get me some of that. Anybody got any questions?